Notes of a German Lane. Late this summer, on one of those scorching September days, around 3 in the afternoon, Mrs. D burst into my house, looking frazzled. I was pretty surprised to see her, especially since she's this super punctual English lady, and we weren't exactly close. We just exchanged casual hellos now and then. She quickly snapped me out of my surprise, and in the broken Persian she picked up over her 20-something years in Iran, told me we had to rush into village K because my old German teacher was dying and wanted to see me. Hearing that made me think back to my own silly choices a few years ago. I had this bright idea to learn German and set up lessons with Mrs. A. I helped her with English while she taught me German. We kept at it for 6 months, but then I realized my German was just a pain for everyone who spoke it. So I decided to ditch the lessons, but I still stayed friends with Mrs. A. because she was cultured and knew a lot about literature and music. Those two things, literature and music, had shaped her soul and refined her taste. Even though there was a big age gap between us, I found it hard to pull away from her, and my fondness for her just kept growing. Plus, since her husband was Iranian, and she liked to say that Iranian blood ran in her 17-year-old daughter and 8-year-old son, she had this special connection to Iranians that other European women didn't seem to have, which made me feel even closer to her. And just so you know, Mrs. A came to Iran long before Hitler and the whole Nazi thing took off in Germany. She was never out of her mind, and she wasn't the type to get kicked out by the Allies when they showed up. Like me, she was fed up with politics and had only seen diced from politicians. I rushed to accompany Mrs. D, and by the time we took a taxi, which looked like everything except a car, to the village of K, I was on the edge of my seat. I should mention that during the ride, I heard the details of a woman's suicide from Mrs. D, and I guess it was due to her hard work over losing her homeland, her home, and her loved ones that set me off, but I couldn't hold back the tears. Her desires to see me stirred my feelings of selfishness, deepening my sorrow. When we entered Mrs. A's room, it was already too late. Mrs. A was lying on her back on the bed, seemingly worn out from the struggles she'd faced. Her face told the story of the pain she had endured in her final moments. Her lips were burned from the fire of waiting, pressed tightly together, and there were still a few drops of sweat on her forehead that hadn't dried yet. She looked incredibly pale, and her facial features seemed to reflect someone who had forgotten both pain and joy. Her eyes were closed, and her lashes were tangled together. She could no longer bear to watch the ridiculous yet sorrowful drama of life. She had left the theater of life unfinished, pulling down the final curtain with calmness and certainty. Next to her bed stood Dr. N, with his bald head and a distressed look on his face. holding a bottle with the barely legible label, potassium cyanide. Beside the bed sat her golden-haired daughter, with a handkerchief over her eyes. Her shoulders shook as she sobbed, biting down on her teeth in grief. Her husband, staring blankly at the scene, nodded at Mrs. D, and as he approached me, 2 large tears rolled down his tired cheeks from behind his glasses and fell onto his lips. With a voice trembling with emotion, he said, "Madam, she was looking forward to see you." Then he handed me a package and said, "These are her notes. She really wanted you to turn them into a story, but unfortunately, you didn't make it in time, and now it's over." Tonight, I've opened the notes of Mrs. A, and with tear-filled eyes, I looked at all these expressions of longing. The voice of Mrs. Muluk-Zarabi is coming from the Tehran radio. Your love is my enemy, settled deep in my heart. Oh, how comfortably it sits in my home, my adversary. From outside, I can hear the shout of a newspaper vendor. Kayhan information, the issue of Iran in the Moscow Assembly. Officers in Rezaiye in Tehran. The notes are spread out in front of me. I read up to page 28 and I'm amazed by the purity of spirit of this lonely woman. I read again. August 2. Tonight I feel worse than any other night. With this heat, I went to the city. God knows with what a strange eagerness and greed I rushed to the cinema. Indeed, I hadn't been going to the cinema before, and where I used to go was a slaughterhouse. But I ran to the slaughterhouse on my own 2 feet. I had heard that in the first part of the program they were showing some scenes of Germany's defeat. I wanted to see it with my own eyes. When you lose a dear one, you can't let go of their lifeless body. You hold that cold frozen body tightly. I wanted to go and see on the big screen what had stolen my dreams and turned my bright days into darkness. What could happen? I wanted to witness the shattered corpse, filled with blood and mud and ashes of my homeland. I wanted to see the pride that has been destroyed, the noble forehead now streamed in black dirt, and curse those responsible for it. I wanted to curse that short, dying liar and that madman who is obvious to the mother's love. Do you think I enjoyed all these grand ambitions of the German government? Do you think I wanted Germans to turn the world upside down? Do you think I felt happy as they advanced in Russia, trampling over young and old alike? No, I'm a mother. I have children myself. I've cared for the growth of these little human saplings. With tearful eyes, I watered these delicate plants, staying awake at night and tiring myself during the day to prevent them from wilting or drying out too soon. I looked after a heart that beats weakly and then brought that heart to a place where love is felt and beats fast and strong. I can't bear to see these miracles of creation, these beating hearts, these lungs that breathe, these minds that think became target to machine guns and bottles. I can't bear to hear that thousands upon thousands of people who have suffered so much to bring others into this world are wiped out in a single air raid. What difference does it make to me? A Russian soldier, an English officer, or an American aviator, all beloved to their mothers and fathers. My heart will never be satisfied knowing that loved ones are separated from their homes and families, closing their eyes in longing for their dear ones and homeland.